right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Taryn Rivera. I'm the photo archivist here at HMRC. I did want to note if you guys have any questions, we'll take care of those at the end, but feel free to drop those in the chat box. Okay. So the Houston Metropolitan Research Center, or HMRC, is a research library and archive that collects, preserves, and makes available the documentary evidence of Houston's history. This includes materials such as photographs, documents, maps, building plans, journals, oral histories, and books. HMRC is one of 3 special collections that are part of the Houston Public Library System. The other branches are the African American Library at the Gregory School and the Clayton Center Library for Genealogical Research. So today's presentation is part of our series where each History Research Center takes you inside the walls for a look into some of the materials found in our collections. Many of our materials are digitized and they can be found on our digital archive at digital.houstonlibrary.org/HMRC. So today we'll be discussing a brief history of the Houston Astrodome, how it was envisioned, the creative minds behind its development, and how it was constructed. We're going to travel back to when the dome was first opened and take a peek at its luxe furnishings and state-of-the-art technology. The Houston Astrodome is an iconic part of the Houston landscape. Since its opening in 1965, it has hosted numerous teams and events, such as the Houston Astros, the Oilers, the University of Houston Cougars, the Muhammad Ali versus Cleveland Williams boxing match in 1966, Judy Garland, the first to perform at the Astrodome in 1965, Evel Knievel in 1971, and the Battle of the Sexes tennis match between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs in 1973. And pictured here at left, it's Billie Jean King, and she's being carried into the arena right before the famous Battle of the Sexes tournament against Bobby Riggs. So now let's delve into the HMRC archives to see what we can discover about this Texas-sized piece of Houston history. So our story begins with Roy Hoffines. He was also known as the Judge. He was born in 1912, and he would become a legendary Houstonian who had a brilliant mind for politics and business strategies. At the age of 19, he graduated law school. At age 22, he was elected to the Texas House of Representatives, and at just age 24, he served as Harris County Judge. So here is Judge Hoffines in the Astrodome in 1965. And on your right, we can see him in a portrait taken in the late 1960s. So from 1952 to 1955, Hoffines served as the mayor of Houston, replacing longtime Mayor Oscar Holcomb. Along the way, Hoffines built substantial wealth for himself by investing in real estate, television, and radio stations. At left is a photo of Hoffines during his tenure as mayor of Houston, and on the right with members of LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. So following his last year as mayor in 1955, Hoffines shifted his focus to investing and developing land in Harris County, collaborating with his friend and partner, Bob Everett Smith. Smith was owner of the largest tract of land in Harris County, and the two began to plan huge shopping centers in the Houston area, hoping to capitalize on the country's new interest in the novel shopping mall. Smith and Hoffines would later collaborate with the Houston Sports Association, pictured here in the Astrodome in 1965. It was while researching design plans for the proposed shopping malls that Hoffines became interested in the geodesic designs of architect Buckminster Fuller. Fuller was interested in building structures that were both energy and cost efficient, yet stable and strong at the same time. Fuller's design of a geodesic dome consisted of triangles arranged in a dome shape, a modern design that piqued the interest of Roy Hoffheinz. Though the shopping center was never built, Hoffheinz did not forget about this intriguing design, which would be his inspiration for what would become known as the eighth wonder of the world. So at left, you can see Buckminster Fuller at a speaking engagement at the University of Houston in 1969. And on the right is a photo of the geodesic dome that was designed by Fuller. Meanwhile, in 1957, the Houston Sports Association was founded by Craig Cullinan, George Kirksey, and Hoffheinz's friend, Bob Everett Smith. One of the main concerns of the organization was the fact that Houston was the only major city in the U.S. without a major league sports team, more specifically a Major League Baseball team. They joined forces with Judge Hoffheinz for his expertise, and he would soon become chairman of the board of the Houston Sports Association. And here we can see a sketch by the Houston Press sports writer and artist Sidney Van Olm. And you can see Judge Hoffheinz on the bottom row, second from left. One of the issues preventing the city from hosting a major league team was the lack of an adequate stadium to house them. At the time, Houston was home to several stadiums, but none were enclosed and air-conditioned, and Houston was hot and muggy during the summertime baseball season and plagued with mosquitoes. Air conditioning had become more and more widely available since the first air-conditioned high-rise was built in Houston in 1941, the Nellie Esperson building pictured here. Stadium planners knew that if they built a new stadium, it would need to be modern to draw in the crowds. These are some of the stadiums in the Houston area before the Astrodome. The Sam Houston Coliseum, shown here on the left, was located in downtown Houston and housed the Houston Fat Stock Show and various concerts, and it had a seating capacity of 9,200. The Rice Stadium, shown here on the right, was also an available venue, which hosted various local football teams and large speaking events, such as President Kennedy's "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech in 1962. Its seating capacity was 47,000. The Robertson Stadium, shown here on the right, also formerly the Jefferson Stadium, at University of Houston, was also in operation at the time with a capacity to seat 32,000. Buffalo Stadium, shown here on the left, which later became Busch Stadium, was constructed in 1928 and located near the University of Houston. This was the stadium that hosted the Houston Buffaloes, Houston's minor league baseball team, up until 1961. It was an outdoor stadium that only seated 14,000 people. Hoffheinz was already full of ideas for planning a huge sports stadium. He envisioned a building that combined comfort for the spectators, large seating capacity, and could be used as an all-purpose venue. Hoffheinz enlisted the help of carpenter Stuart Young to build a small model of his proposed dome stadium, ready to be shown to the leaders of the National League. Pictured here is the architect's model for the Harris County Domed Stadium that was featured in Houston Business Magazine. On October 17, 1960, Hoffheinz and members of the Houston Sports Association traveled to Chicago to make their pitch to the National League executives. Their proposed stadium would be circular in shape, seat 47,000 people, be completely air-conditioned, and be completely enclosed by a clear dome, which was a novel design at the time. It would be the world's very first enclosed air-conditioned indoor stadium. And here we have a photo of Judge Hoffheinz and Mayor Roy Cutter with a model of the dome, and this was featured in the Houston Post on January 7th, 1961. Their pitch worked, and Houston was awarded their first Major League Baseball team, the Colt 45s. And here we have a team photo of the original Colt 45's team, taken by photographer Harold Israel in 1962. The Dome Stadium proposed by Hofheinz would be years in the making. In the meantime, the city needed a place to host their new Major League Baseball team. Colt Stadium cost $2 million to build and seated 37,000. Construction was completed in just 4 months. The Colt 45's first game opened on April 10, 1962, where they beat the Chicago Cubs 8-2 with an audience of over 22,000 fans. The outdoor stadium proved further that an enclosed air-conditioned stadium was needed, with complaints about the heat, muggy weather, and mosquitoes. And while fans braved the tough Houston weather in Colt Stadium, they could view the construction of their future climate-controlled stadium, which was happening right next door. And at left, you can see Colt Stadium, and in the background, you can actually see the Astrodome being constructed right behind it. And on the right, you can see a game being played in the open-air Colt Stadium field. To get the new domed stadium project underway, $15 million in Harris County funds were used from a voter-approved 1958 bond, earning the stadium its official name, the Harris County Domed Stadium. The new dome would completely dwarf the temporary Colt Stadium at 18 stories tall and cover 9.5 acres of land, which, according to the Astrodome Conservancy, the stadium could fit 168 Whataburgers, or 10 city halls, or the entire Toyota Center. And pictured here is the future site of the Astrodome, which at the time was mostly undeveloped prairie. Groundbreaking for the stadium began January 3rd, 1962. The site for the stadium, located 5 miles from downtown Houston, was 250 acres in size. Earlier potential locations included Memorial Park, but the site eventually chosen was large enough to accommodate the building site, parking, and transit for the thousands of people that would be visiting the stadium. And here you can see men driving the tractor starting to clear out the land. Standing behind a large sign reading "World's First Air-Conditioned Dome Stadium," attendees of the ceremony marked the occasion with traditional shovels to break ground. But in true Texas fashion, they also fired bullets into the ground from their Colt 45 revolvers in honor of the new team. Attendees included members of the Sports Association, including Judge Hofheinz, Vice Chairman of the Board of the HSA, and Craig Cullinan, President of HSA. Harris County officials also attended, including Judge Bill Elliott, Commissioner Ramsey, Commissioner Sayers, and Commissioner Squatty Lyons. In the months following the groundbreaking, the area for the future dome was excavated in May 1962, creating a hole 26 feet deep and 700 feet in diameter. Meanwhile, architectural plans for the building were still incomplete. Changes have been made to the design to include a fallout shelter in order to receive federal funding, dragging out the planning process. After the pit was excavated, the county received news that they would not be receiving expected federal funding for the project, and expenses were growing. Architects were now concerned that the $15 million bond was not going to cover the entire project. So what was to become of the stadium, which for months had been an empty pit? And you can see Judge Hofheinz here at the construction site pit. In December 1962, an additional $9.6 million bond was passed by Harris County voters, and construction was underway again. In March of 1963, the foundation for the stadium was finally poured, and the next phase of the project could begin. And here you can see an aerial photo of the dome construction site with its foundation. Two architectural firms were chosen to design the stadium: Lloyd and Morgan and Wilson, Morris, Crane, and Anderson, with the two teams dividing the work based on their area of expertise. The roof of the dome was going to be immense and heavy, made of over 9,000 tons of steel. To temporarily support the roof as it was constructed, 37 200-foot steel towers were erected. And here you can see in this photo from the Houston Post, the steel towers that were put in place to support the roof, which kind of resembled oil derricks at the time. With a 645-foot span, it was the largest of its kind to be built. After careful deliberation and consults, the original geodesic dome design favored by Hofheinz was not used. Instead, the dome would be constructed using the closely related lamella system. Instead of interlocking triangles, the lamella system was composed of diamond-shaped units. No support columns would be used, ensuring viewers had a completely unobstructed view of the game. At the time, only a few companies in the United States were experienced in this type of design. G.R. Hewitt of Roof Structures, Inc. in St. Louis was hired to oversee its construction. And at left is a close-up of the roof where you can see those diamond shapes, and at the right is an overhead view. To support the dome without visible columns, a giant tension ring was installed at the base of the roof, attached with joints designed to move as the building expanded or contracted with temperatures or the wind. The ring itself was supported by 72 steel columns. To add additional support, 8 T-shaped supports were used, each one 70 feet long and 8 feet wide, which were buried 11 feet underground. And here you can see Judge Roy Hofheinz, and he's standing with the National League president Warren Giles and astronaut Alan Shepard inside the Astrodome in 1964 while it was being constructed. In November of 1963, the roof of the dome was slowly lowered into place. To make sure that it was completely safe and stable, it was lowered very, very slowly over a period of about 3 weeks. The weight of the dome was so heavy that when in place, the entire stadium settled 4 inches lower. And you can see in these two aerial photos from the Houston Post and the Burt Brandt collection just how massive the structure was. At the bottom, you can see some teeny tiny little construction cars at the bottom, or trucks, I should say. Also in 1963, the Manned Spacecraft Center, which would eventually be renamed the Johnson Center, opened in Clear Lake, located approximately 20 miles southeast of the stadium's construction site. It was the new home of NASA and Mission Control, and space-themed everything became extremely popular in the Houston area, so much so that the area became known as Space City. And this 1965 photo shows Mission Control at the new Manned Spacecraft Center. In keeping with the theme, and partly to avoid paying royalties to the manufacturer of Colt firearms, Judge Hofheinz decided to change the name of the Colt 45s to the Houston Astros. With the team name change, the Harris County Dome Stadium became unofficially known as the Astrodome. And here's a photo of Judge Hoffines with one of the players. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to identify the player's name. Construction of the Astrodome was completed November of 1964, taking 3 years to complete at an estimated cost of $35 million. In this aerial photo, also by Burt Brandt, you can see the completed dome of the roof. And here we see Judge Hoffine standing in front of the completed Astrodome. His project that had been years in the making had finally become a reality. And then we have opening night. So the first game played by the newly minted Astros in their brand new stadium took place on April 9th, 1965 against the Yankees, a historic day for Houston history. The game sold out, and a crowd of 47,879 excited visitors got to witness the first indoor air-conditioned ball game. Notable visitors included Texas Governor John Connally, who threw out the first pitch of the game. Even President Lyndon B. Johnson and First Lady Lady Bird Johnson were in attendance, who were longtime friends of Judge Hoffines. Yankees player Mickey Mantle was the first to score a home run in the new stadium. The Astros christened the new stadium with a win against the Yankees 2-1. And these are some news clippings that are part of the Judge Roy Hoffines collection here at HMRC, and they show the Astrodome on opening night. So now we're going to talk about the interior of the Astrodome. When fans entered the brand new Astrodome on April 9th, 1965, they were greeted with a state-of-the-art facility with features that had never been seen before. People were so impressed by the new stadium, they paid $1 just to tour it, as you can see in this photo of a couple touring the stadium in 1965. So, cooling the dome. The most impressive feature of the Astrodome was, of course, the fact that it was completely indoors and climate controlled. Engineers had another unique challenge: cooling, heating, and filtering an enclosed area of about 405,000 square feet that was over 200 feet high. Another aspect to consider was the amount of smokers that would attend the game. At the time, smoking was permitted in most public places. The amount of people smoking in the enclosed space meant that smoke could easily accumulate, creating a hazy cloud that could affect visibility of the game. So their solution were carbon filters, the largest that were ever made at the time, which required enough charcoal to fill 3 railroad boxcars. All told, the HVAC system alone cost $4.5 million. But as most Houstonians would agree, in 100-degree summer temperatures, it's completely worth the price tag. And here we have a photo of spectators at the game in 1965. When designing the stadium roof, architects not only had to design the largest domed roof in the world, they also had to consider the need for natural light. At the time of its construction, players and spectators alike were used to the game occurring on real grass. The architects were thus tasked with the problem of creating an environment that would support the growth of real grass. It would need large amounts of sunlight to stay alive. Experts from Texas A&M and the U.S. Department of Agriculture were consulted and expressed concern that the grass would not grow well in the stadium environment with low light and heavy foot traffic. But at the time, artificial grass for sports arenas had not yet been developed. To help mitigate the problem, 4,500 skylights were worked into the roof design, with diffusers attached to reduce shadows on the playing field. And this photo shows construction crews working on the interior of the dome where the grass would later be installed. The skylights soon created their own set of problems. Glare from the sun during afternoon games was blinding, causing players to lose sight of the ball. Half of the skylights were quickly painted over, as you can see here in this photo from the Houston Post. So that solved the glare problem. But after the skylights were painted over, a new issue arose. The further reduced light was not enough to keep the grass alive, and it quickly died. Workers were called in to physically spray paint the grass green until a solution could be found. So before every game, they were actually out there painting the grass green so it would be pretty for the game. In 1966, construction managers sent out bids for companies for a solution for the dying grass. They were eventually contacted by a company called Kimstrand, which had been experimenting with artificial turf for inner city schools. The product was not yet available, but officials with the dome formed a contract with Kimstrand to develop the product quickly. Workers at the company rushed to finish development of the product and manufacture enough of it to cover the dome's playing field before the first game of the 1966 season. Narrowly making the deadline, the last of the artificial turf was installed in the early hours of the morning of the game. Hofheinz came to an agreement with Kimstrand to market the product as AstroTurf, the first artificial turf used in a stadium, which is now widely used in sports complexes everywhere. And here you can see at the very first game with the AstroTurf, the scoreboard message actually reads, "You are about to witness a historic event, the first baseball game on a man-made surface, AstroTurf, developed by Kimstrand division of the Monsanto Company." It's a pretty big deal at the time. The AstroTurf even had its own group of caretakers. Called Earthmen, their uniforms were designed to resemble astronauts, in keeping with the modern space theme of the dome. Their job was to vacuum and maintain the turf during games, much to the entertainment of the crowd. And at left, you can see the Earthmen vacuuming the AstroTurf. And at right, you can see a more close-up photo of the workers with their uniforms that included space helmets. I kind of feel bad for them. The dome also featured 6 tiers of seating and had brightly colored upholstered seats. As designers didn't need to worry about the seats being weatherproof, extra attention could be given to the comfort of the guests. Midway through construction, Judge Hofheinz had an ingenious idea. Fearing that most people would not want to purchase seats in the top deck, as it was so high above the playing field, he decided to convert the top deck of seats into luxury suites. The suites could be leased out by the year and cost between $15,000 to $30,000. And here's a photo of the original stadium seats. And in the background, you can see the Trailblazer restaurant. The largest suite was leased by, of course, Judge Hofheinz. What began as a 2-story small apartment in the initial construction became a 24-room permanent apartment that occupied 5 floors. The judge's private apartment and suite were hidden by the scoreboard for extra privacy. The judge spared no expense to make sure his suite was the ultimate in luxury and hired designer Harper Goff to create it. And pictured here is the judge's very ornate private office. Now we're going to take a look at a few more photos from the judge's suite that I think are super interesting. So most impressive was the presidential suite, which you can see here on the left, complete with a grand staircase, tapestries, antique furniture, and even a rug that featured the presidential seal. Hofheinz's private suite of rooms also featured a beauty salon, a shooting gallery, a mini golf course, a puppet theater, a private terrace for viewing the arena, a bowling alley, a chapel, and a circus-themed playroom for his grandchildren. And the middle photo, you can see one of the conference rooms that are in the suite, complete with red walls and carpet and zebra pattern chairs. And on the right is one of the bedrooms in the suite with a beautiful chandelier and canopied headboard. And here you can see the shooting gallery that on the left here, which was decorated in a really detailed Western theme, complete with its own little cowboy. And on the right is the private beauty salon and a barber shop for the judge and his family. Here on the left is the judge's private terrace that overlooked the Astrodome Stadium. It has a little built-in kitchenette and cafe chairs for guests to sit and watch the game. And on the right is a playroom that was created for the judge's grandchildren. He really loved the circus and circus themes, so you can see that here in the playroom that was designed. So the luxury and comfort of the dome was not just contained in the judge's suite. The new stadium contained exclusive clubs, several restaurants, a gift shop, and concession stands. Everything was planned to the smallest detail, including the uniforms worn by staff. The uniforms, which were closer to costumes, were all designed by Evelyn Norton Anderson, a Houston-based clothing and costume designer. The photo on the left shows the uniform design for the Spacette. The Spacette staff helped usher guests to their seats in the dome. The middle photo shows the Earthman groundskeepers uniforms, the design for those, which we mentioned earlier. And then the photo on the right shows the uniform design for the hostesses at the Western-themed Trailblazer restaurant. The two most exclusive and luxurious restaurants in the Dome were not open to all of the public. The Sky Dome Club was only open to those occupying the 53 top boxes, called the Sky Dome boxes. It was decorated in a space-age theme and lit by black lights. It also provided a beautiful view of the Houston skyline. Members of the Sky Dome Club even received their own personal engraved gold spatula for serving. And this color photo by Harold Israel really shows how beautiful the colors and decor were in that club. The second exclusive restaurant was the Astrodome Club, open only to season ticket holders. Decorated in red and black, it was described as having a historical theme from the 18th century all the way to the space age. It also featured a bar that was advertised as males only, a symbol of the time. And this photo shows the very elaborate place settings and gourmet food in the Astrodome Club. The three other restaurants in the Dome were open to everyone. There was the Trailblazer, with a theme that was described as showcasing man's struggle for a better life. The Countdown Cafeteria, shown here in this photo by Harold Israel, which featured sports throughout the ages, and the Dome Skeller, which offered large group seating and was themed after 19th century Austrian beer gardens. Apart from the restaurants, fans could visit 9 concession stands throughout the stadium and purchase quick service food such as peanuts and popcorn. So at the left here, you can see visitors stopping at a concession counter for some popcorn. And on the right, you can see a vendor selling some programs, which could maybe describe the events or game taking place, or it might be more information about the stadium itself. And here you can see a rather unenthusiastic young man at a souvenir stand in the stadium with a variety of sports memorabilia, including caps, t-shirts, pennants, and buttons. And fans could also purchase merchandise from opposing teams, such as Pittsburgh Pirates pennants or LA Dodgers caps. Another impressive feature of the stadium was its scoreboard, called the Astrolight. Designed by Fair Play Scoreboards, it was the first and largest of its kind built at the time. In effect, the first large-screen TV. It was as tall as a four-story building, weighed 300 tons, and cost over $2 million to construct. The Astrolight scoreboard lit up with Western-themed animated pictures when home runs were made, and which you can see here after player Bob Watson scores a home run during a game. It was also used to post messages, event details, and even commercial ads. The Astros continued to play at the Astrodome for another 42 seasons until 1999 when the team moved to Enron Field, which is now Minute Maid Park. Pictured here is a 1968 newspaper ad for an Astros versus Pirates game with box tickets only $3.50. This undated advertising pamphlet about the Astrodome features the many shows and events held at the Astrodome. Houston Astros baseball, the Oilers football, University of Houston Cougars football, boxing, the livestock show and rodeo, basketball, and an upcoming boat show. During the late 1960s, Judge Hoffheinz continued the Astro expansion. In 1966, the Livestock Exposition Building opened, better known as the Astro Hall. Covering 12 acres, it housed the livestock for the annual Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Envisioning a family-friendly amusement park complete with coasters, train rides, and animal shows, Judge Hoffheinz created Astroworld. On June 1st, 1968, Astroworld opened its doors, providing generations of Houstonians family-friendly entertainment. And pictured here is a 1965 aerial view of the Astrodome and Astroworld complex. For the next 43 years, the Astrodome hosted countless events, concerts, and notables from Elvis Presley to Selena, NSYNC to Pink Floyd, the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, the 1992 Republican National Convention, WrestleMania in 2001, and countless sports and conferences. And pictured here is a 1981 game between the Houston Astros and the Texas Rangers. In 1970, Hoffheinz consolidated his properties into the Astrodome Corporation. He eventually sold his company in 1976 and the Astros team in 1979. In 1988, the aging structure was given a much-needed renovation, although sadly this included removing the judges' suite and original Astrolight scoreboard from the stadium. In 2006, Judge Hoffheinz was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and in 2020 was inducted into the Houston Astros Hall of Fame. And this photo shows the judge watching one of many games from his first-class view in his private suite. October 9th, 1999 marked the last game played by the Astros in the Astrodome before they were relocated to Minute Maid. The last concert played in the Astrodome was George Strait in March 2002 for the closing night of the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. In 2013, the Astrodome was named a national treasure by the National Trust for Historic Preservation and listed in the National Register of Historic Places. In 2016, the Astrodome Conservancy was formed, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation of this historic landmark. In 2018, it was designated a Texas State Antiquities Landmark. The building continues to be under the ownership of Harris County, and fundraising and community engagement continue today to formulate a feasible plan to keep the Astrodome in use. And that concludes my presentation for Eighth Wonder, the making of the Astrodome. Here's a list of resources that were used for the project. And then also we have a slide featuring the collections we have at HMRC where we found the photos if you're interested in further research. If you do have additional questions that we haven't answered, you can go ahead and send in an email to photo.reference@houstontech.gov, that email right there, and that will go straight to me and the photo team here at HMRC so we can do some further research to your question. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me and for listening in. Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation.